So I'm just going to wait. If you can hear me right now, I'm just going to wait for a confirmation on our side that it can be heard okay. And if so, then we can bear with us just a couple of moments longer. The reason why if you can hear us anyway, but the reason why we're starting a little bit late is my fault. So sorry. Okay, so it's better. So we'll go with that then. So this is our first. I guess we'll just call this like. The idea is we want this to be something that's somewhat casual, but obviously we dig into serious topics because we're answering questions that have been asked. So it's we are covering stuff that is critical, but the idea is that hopefully we just kind of stay open and not something so rigid and formal like you may expect from like regular PR and stuff like that. And then the idea is that we do this, maybe we do this a few times, and then we bring in different people from the different teams, essentially, who are working on different aspects of the projects, get familiar with the way that they work, and also every single time we say this is what we're doing, and you stay up to speed with what we're building. So on this call right now, so although you see that we're all kind of, Mike is coming from Fun, it's actually coming from Zeronium right now. So I'm Zeronium on Discord, but I'm also Sean, and I'm basically VP of Product at Animoca, and that means that I head up everything that we're doing on REVV Motorsport most directly, but also a bunch of other stuff that we do at Animoca as well in regards to blockchain. With me is Fun, and she's essentially the art director of Animoca, and then also I don't know.
Just call me a wild boar, right?
And also wild boar is he's basically the head of engineering at Animoca.
Yeah, my name's Jackie though, by the way.
So hopefully it means that we can touch on like stuff with some decent detail and like just to kind of kick things off to start with as well, is that if like our kind of community team is working super hard, and they can only share with you the information that we're kind of comfortable with sharing with them sometimes. So it's kind of like when it comes to updates and stuff like that, it's less about what they can tell you, but more about what we're comfortable with what we're doing sometimes. And obviously the idea is that we kind of could share as much as possible. But sometimes, schedules change and kind of work progress changes and stuff like that. So we're not always as clear and as kind of consistent as we want to be. All right, so we're going to go through a bunch of questions that we've received prior to this. It covers all of REVV Motorsport. So first question that we got was, are there other projects in development that will use REVV? So ultimately, REVV's a decentralized token, so anybody can ultimately use it for any project if they want to. But I think kind of like we are building, and this is going to become more obvious in the next month, I think, ultimately. But we're building so much for REVV Motorsport itself. And what that means is obviously, there's F1 Delta, MotoGP Ignition, there's Formula E, which we're probably going to start showing you beginning of next month, I guess, in regards to some of the assets and getting the website out. But there's also REVV Motorsport as the gameplay experience as well. And that is something that is going to be becoming far more kind of tangible in the next kind of couple of months. Because REVV Motorsport is something where we're looking to really kind of flex the interoperability model that we want to do, not only across chain, but also across end. It does mean that we still kind of bring in and create these kind of pillar experiences like with F1 Delta Time and MotoGP. We still look for kind of, let's call them championship experiences. But like REVV Motorsport is almost like an amalgamation of everything, and it's where we really kind of do open interoperability at its most fullest. Okay? And that is us doing, original assets, user-generated content, building it all around like a very a highly polished and like we're excited what we're building. A racing experiences that is more kind of simulation arcade. It is something that ultimately you should be able to play with a controller as much as you can a keyboard. But ultimately, REVV is, although we are building stuff for REVV, the scope of what we're building is considerable. So it's kind of like, yes, it's the primary ecosystem for the REVV token, it's REVV Motorsport, but we don't expect there's going to be a shortage in places where it can actually be used. And next question. So hopefully that answered that question. I'll be a bit more concise with the follow-up because otherwise I'll take up too much time. Can we bypass other items with REVV? Yeah, so REVV is essentially like everything that we release is ultimately being released to have REVV be the main token of purchase. And the interaction with content as well. So also like we have to strike a balance between what we want with REVV and making sure REVV has utility and then also value as a token. But similar to what we did with MotoGP, we also need to be caught. We're aware that not everybody has crypto and getting crypto isn't always easy. So that's why we do things like, a credit card as a possible option. And I think like, as we go forwards, we at Animoca, we've got a token friendly, right? So we've got like the token and game token. And there's also always a possibility where we do things that this subset of content you can buy with gaming. This content you can buy with Tower, right? And I think that, and vice versa, right? There's probably going to be something in the Tower. You're going to need some REVV to come in and buy. But yeah, it's REVV is kind of always going to have a massive utility. Let's have a look. So that's that question. More transparency. What has been done and any other things that you would do to achieve it? So this is one of them, hopefully. We have a bunch of AMAs that we're going to be running. I think we ran one AMA yesterday. I think we have 2 more that we're doing today. No, next week, sorry. And then obviously the idea is that we will kind of run these kind of sessions as constant as we can. And the thing is, it's kind of like the reason why, so there's a few things, right? So we can communicate, but sometimes there's not always something to communicate, I guess, in some ways. We're like incredibly like very deep in regards to building stuff right now. And I think kind of what sometimes can get lost a little bit is that when people are building games, they might give you a little bit of an idea about it, but then they won't say anything for 3 years because making games is very time consuming. But everything that we're building is kind of like in public, operating in space, right? So everything is taking as long as it takes, but it just seems kind of as it drags out because like we're doing it in such an open manner. But yeah, I mean, like it doesn't mean that like don't take these as kind of excuses for how things go or what we don't share, but ultimately it's yeah, we do want to do continued AMAs like this, and if this does work and people are interested in it, then we'll do more of these as well. Will there be more collaborations with other brands and teams? Yes, there will, and no, I can't tell you about it. So, but once we can, that's stuff that we will share. But of course, it's like we are very ambitious with what we want to do with REVV Motorsport, and we have so much that we kind of got in this pipeline. But yes, it's and brands is part of our name, right, as a company, and that's kind of a fact that will persist. Okay, so REVV, how will the Flow ETH REVV bridge work? All right, so I'll actually have Jackie shine a little bit of light on this stuff, but for this bridge, it's a centralized bridge, so it works a specific way, but if you want to talk a little bit about exactly what that means.
Yeah, so Flow, it's a very new blockchain to us. I mean, to everyone else in the world too. I mean, from maybe Dapper Labs, I guess, So it will be a centralized bridge that work as an escrow, like both sides, like mainnet Ethereum and the Flow mainnet itself. And we just release escrow token on either side as the token are transferred. So that's just how it works. I mean, nothing really fancy there. It's a centralized bridge. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like one thing is that we don't know what that looks like in the future because obviously a centralized bridge is not going to scale, right? So maybe that's what we use to get started with. There's not a lot of options on Flow for like there's not like a bunch of alternatives, right?
No.
But you know, as it matures as a platform, people are building tools and stuff, then there may be other options for bridging the token back and forward.
Well, however, Polygon is completely different.
Yeah, Polygon's completely different. But of course, we're also doing the same thing where we're bridging there as well. All right, so where are we now? Next question is, what is the development plan for the multiplayer in F1 DT? So we're currently running through prototypes at the moment. One of the things that we have been doing is 20 car prototypes, because obviously that's a considerable weight applied to the game client than what people run right now in qualifying, because you've just got one car there. But this is obviously running 20, so the simulation can change. But ultimately what we're doing is we're running some prototypes in regards to some ways that we want to approach the gameplay, because essentially we want to make sure that the gameplay is something that remains enjoyable. But let's say if we run, we're not going to be in a scenario where we do like, unless it makes sense, there's a scenario where it makes sense. We're not going to have like 60 laps, like, because people don't want to sit there for 2 hours driving around it. What we will do is have maybe a dozen laps or so, or kind of we'll find a sweet spot for it ultimately. But also the main thing that we want to do with the multiplayer stuff is have it be more driver focused, or at least kind of use the driver stats way more. Because the qualifying version, that is definitely heavily kind of leaning more towards what the car stats are and the car components. Time trial uses both, but and ultimately like the racing game will use both, but it's more kind of different to what you see right now with qualifying. The multiplayer version will also leverage far harder the kind of driver stats as well. Polygon, what is the current status of the Polygon transition? We are basically in a state where we have just sent a bunch of contracts for audit. Basically, that's where we are right now. So some of the things that make this take time is essentially like how we want meta transactions to be handled with our contracts on Polygon. If you want to talk a bit more about that. No? Okay. So they're being audited anyway. Yeah. So we have them, they've been sent for audit. There's a batch of contracts we've sent. Obviously this takes time, and probably what we'll send is first they're going to find issues with it, but yeah, we're just starting the audits.
So the audit is not just meta transaction. It's also like how we're gonna bridge the REVV token like to Polygon. So we're trying to audit everything that we're gonna do in Polygon one go. Actually in 3 different stages. So that the first stage will be the meta transaction past the REVV token. That's the goal and that's the plan. So next one will be the 1155 that we're going to support on Polygon. And yeah, I think it's
all right. Next question was, what is the current stage of development for the MotoGP game stuff? So it's still early right now. We're going through kind of design concepts. I mean, like, we know what we want to build ultimately, but it's just kind of drilling into what that means from like a mechanics and play perspective, right? So it takes some fleshing out. But the idea that we have right now is that we're kind of creating 2 modules of play. One of them is for the cards that we've been kind of and going to be releasing first. And then the second module that will be kind of like its first release will definitely be in a beta phase, which is kind of the management experience itself. So right now, like we expect to have both of these available within 2021. With everything going well for us, that would mean that like this kind of card gameplay kind of module would be kind of a Q3 thing for us. So it's kind of Hong Kong wise, that means that it's release maybe August, September. But yeah, it's ticking along for sure. When will it be possible to open purchase packs? Okay, so this is a good one, right? This is the one everyone keeps asking. So there's a few things that we can go through here. So like we had our first NFT contracts. They finished audit. I think it was what, like maybe 2 weeks ago now or something like that.
yeah, 2 weeks ago, and we got it actually deployed on mainnet.
Yeah,
right now
we got it deployed on mainnet as well right now. It's there. But like this isn't our final contract though either. We're very much expecting to be upgrading it. Some of the reasons why we'll go into a little bit more in a sec. But basically, so the contract that we're going to use to mint from to begin with is essentially our packs contract. So like what that also means alongside those packs being available, there's going to be a UI update to the website, because what you need to do on Flow before you can receive any NFTs from any contract or collection, let's say, you essentially need to create a storage on the wallet itself. So we'll be releasing a UI that lets you do that, which means that then you can receive assets from our contract, and they will just be airdropped. So once we basically have approval from the wallet that we know is to receive packs, we will then airdrop them essentially to the user. And that, if things go well, so we were able to solve a couple of problems yesterday on that in regards to some of the issues that were stopping us. But like we might, hopefully that means that people have packs by next week. That's kind of where we want to kind of target right now, for sure.
Correct.
But like going into that a little bit, I think something that would be interesting is some of the other stuff, why we need to modify the contracts and why the car contracts are a bit more different. And it's due to how we need to kind of try and prepare the contracts for when we use kind of marketplaces and stuff like that. So we want to go into like that approval stuff, because that's actually important.
So yes, so problem again, Flow, it's a very new blockchain. Cadence is a very new language, and actually for Flow there are no actual tools, or there are no any standards on tokens, especially on non-fungible tokens. Well, actually they have a base for it, but they don't really have standard. They don't really have an implementation of doing approval, like approve a marketplace to transfer a token on your behalf and all that. That's not built in. So no one really like have an idea right now at this moment how that should be implemented. So that's why we might have to keep updating our contracts to adapt the standard, like what everyone one will be okay with. To also a like general marketplace. So I think for what we understand right now, marketplace for Flow is just for individual dApps. So each dApp will have their own marketplace.
Yeah. That's also, I mean, like, who knows what that looks like several months down the line. It's like, it can't be understated how new Flow is. And like the reason why Ethereum is as mature as it is because a lot of people were able to kind of freely develop and experiment on it. And, it's kind of the right time for a lot of people to come and basically throw stuff on there. But that's not going to be there for Flow, and it's going to take some time before any of that exists. So it's, we're building a lot of first. Anybody who's working on Flow is building a lot of first. But I will say that, like, overall, we actually do really like Flow as a blockchain. It's just kind of obviously being aware that it's kind of having to build stuff for the first time.
Oh, one thing though about Flow, right now they have still not enabled gas, so it's still like gas free.
Yeah. So I mean, like, gas is always expected. It's going to be far less of a factor, but it's a no factor right now because there's no gas enabled on the chain. All right. So does opening time affect what cards and print numbers can be? No. So the only thing that affects the print number is essentially the order that it was created, and the order that it was created is basically baked in on the creation of the pack itself. So like, it doesn't matter how long you hold on to a pack, the print numbers that are on the cards in the pack are already basically set for it. So yeah, you can hold on it and never open it, and it will still have those print numbers inside. What are MotoGP utility bus that collect cards that you offer? So some of the stuff we're trying to do and looking and interested in doing is basically like, if you have certain collections of assets, we reflect that in game, or we recognize it in game. So let's say, for example, if you have a bunch of Rossi cards across kind of his his years of racing, then what that could mean is that you get an additional buff to your Rossi assets. If you have Rossi's performance across championship wins or maybe track kind of wins, podium finishes, then that might give you an increased performance on that specific track as long as you're using Rossi on that. So those kind of small kind of buffs, plus minuses that are going to be rolled into how, on like the very highest level of how the collection of cards and the ownership of cards is going to be attached to like the gameplay side of it, the management game, because obviously the collectible cards will also have tons of other things. Next question, what are some of the features we can expect to see in the marketplace? So to begin with, it'll just be basically a buy and sell. Probably list for a price. Oh, no, that's that one. So yeah, yeah, so like obviously we want to have things like auctions, bundles and stuff like that, as many user features as we can offer. But to begin with, for sure, it's kind of, can you list an item and can you purchase that item that's listed for that price? Later, we'll do stuff where you can bid for items, yes, auctions, bundles, and all the rest of it. But like the day one version of this is going to be simple and kind of very limited in regards to your purchase options, right? And also in kind of currencies that you can buy and sell. And we want to be able to support Rev day one. We want to be able to maybe have a credit card option for buying. But obviously how this lines up will be dependent on, like we touched on a little bit about, like there's still some uncertainties exactly how kind of a somewhat decentralized marketplace can work on Flow right now. So some of that stuff we just need to wait and see how that kind of matures for the standards that exist on Flow for contracts. What is the minimum requirement to play MotoGP? Do you need NFTs other than the card? So again, you can use the cards and just play the card part of the game. For the management game, you will need some of the management assets, but there are a few ways that we want to look into. So one thing we definitely want to do with MotoGP is make sure that it stays accessible, and not have scenarios like we have with F1 Delta Time, where it can be kind of really quite expensive to even start playing at the lowest level. We want to keep it super achievable, super accessible. So bare minimum, you'll have some play experience that you could have with just the cards alone, but then there'll be other experiences like the actual management game itself will require a different set of assets. But also it's kind of, there are things that we may want to look at where, for example, if you have a bunch of Rossi cards, maybe that can allow you to access something, or at least grants you access to the management play as though you do own Rossi as a gameplay asset as well, right? But these are things we need to think about and make sure they make sense. But yeah, the idea is that we want to keep it accessible. Will early adopters receive any bonuses? So I think if you look at what we did with F1 DT and everyone who kind of had some faith, they were able to stake those cars that they came in and bought early, right? So, I think we want to continue to do that because we know that there's a lot of trust that people put into what we're building when they come in early and buy. How we do that, I guess it's going to change each time, and whatever's going to make sense. But at least, yeah, if you came in and you bought early, we know that and we'll always be able to track and see what a 2020 card is from these packs that were sold, right? We know what those are. So yeah, we will always look to make sure that there is something there that kind of grants some form of benefit to people who had those cards. And like also this becomes like, it'll come a bit more evident, I guess, in some ways for when we start when we start approaching REVV Motorsport assets as well. So yeah, like for example, people who have been engaged with our ecosystem can be expecting to receive batches of REVV Motorsport NFTs, right? That's going to be happening. And we're going to talk about that a bit more very, very, very clearly within next week, essentially, as we push on with that. When is Formula E expected to be released? So we will probably have the website experience as kind of its initial Formula E has arrived in July. And then that'll be followed by kind of the initial kind of content releases. So that like summer is definitely, or at least kind of these next 2-3 months is when people are really going to start seeing much more about Formula E. What chain will it be on? Considering, so like I said, we really like Flow, but it's very, very early still, but we do like Flow a lot. We are obviously putting a bunch of effort into Polygon, so that's a possibility as well. Or any other kind of EVM, I guess, is always a possibility because we already have like groundwork contracts. But yeah, it'll be something that we've been talking about most likely already. So it'll be a Polygon or a Flow, or maybe something we've announced already that we work with in the wider Animoca universe, like a BSC or something. We'll kind of like share that as this content comes through. And ultimately, like, we don't want to be locked by the chain of choice. Ultimately, we want to be able to build gameplay clients that can basically read from where your content is, right? But yeah, well, it'll be something that we're already building on at least, or kind of you'd definitely be aware of it. Last question: is Sean the actor that played Euron Greyjoy on Game of Thrones? Sure. Let's say I am, right? Let's say I'm that same person. All right. So I guess were there questions? I guess check with Alison, see if there's. If someone's got hand up, right? Is that hand up? You see there?
Hmm?
On there. Okay.
Yeah. I think, do you have to,
And then you unmute,
did you,
I think.
no, Alison can do that. If you have the speaker on, actually.
But yeah, that might be what it is.
But the mic is no.
Sorry.
There you go. I've got it. I had to unmute myself.
Yeah.
You hear me okay?
Let me get a mic. Yeah.
Can you hear me, Sean?
Just a moment.
Yeah.
There's always some hiccups.
Sean, can you hear me?
I think something as well. I believe that we just rolled out the track earnings. So I think track holders should be the segment holders should be seeing that stuff arriving in wallets. And that has all gone out.
Can you hear me, Sean?
Maybe plug into yours and then just see if you can hear, and you can just unmute from it.
So, guys, the audience can hear me. Let me know if you can hear me.
Yeah, I already turn on.
I'll try again. Sean, can you hear?
You got it?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. how
Okay,
about
cool.
that then?
All right. So,
Maybe just
Hold on.
sure.
你 post 咗分身嗰個，你 post 咗分身嗰個，瞄咗佢，用我嗰個。
Okay. Okay, we're kind of, we're just gonna, because this is, you know, has problems, or we have problems using it. We'll just take a question in the form of text, I think. So, Timor, Alison's gonna basically grab that question from you, so you can just kind of, I guess, DM her.
Okay,
and she'll
no
be
worries.
able
You
to
can't
just kind
hear
of
me
help
now.
answer.
Okay, cool. I'll just type it.
So let's see. Give Alison a minute. I guess while we're waiting for that, though, I mean, like, if there's anything else that we might want to discuss. Let's think. What might be? So yeah, like I mentioned before, a couple of times actually, REVV Motorsport as the gameplay platform is essentially going to become far more visible in the coming few weeks. It means that, like, starting with the NFTs, we're not doing an initial sale for that stuff either. Essentially, what we're going to do is there will be NFT airdrops, and those airdrops are going to go to people who have been participating in what we're doing. And there'll be like a rolling airdrop of that to begin with, and essentially those are going to be playable assets that can be taken into the REVV Motorsport gameplay, right? So, and we'll be showing what that looks like as well. So this doesn't, it's important also to kind of keep in mind that that doesn't kind of override anything that we're doing with F1 Delta Time or MotoGP Ignition or what we're going to be doing with Formula E either, or future titles that we bring in that are kind of these championship pillars. It exists with and alongside them. But REVV Motorsport is definitely a platform that is kind of, it lets us do a lot because it does really use the interoperability aspect. So, and we think there's a lot of cool stuff we can do there. And later on, this doesn't come immediately, but it's also a platform to allow us to do things such as like enabling of UGC and stuff like that too. I think, yeah, I think we tried to get questions. It was our fault. We couldn't get on board, but it wasn't due to, like, you know, Alison kind of worked super hard to line all this stuff up, so it's all good on her side. But yeah, just technical issues, right?
First time ever anywhere.
Yeah, first time. So basically what that means is that next time we do this, we can answer questions, right? Oh, here we go. Okay. Oh, okay. So there is so medium tires. There is a difference. There is a difference between them. It's just so the way that it works for medium tires is, so time trial uses it most. Of course, you'd see it there most because like it's so heavily weighted when it comes from a gameplay perspective. But they do have like an incremental impact. They do, because like the way that the plus minus works on the time trial is that it really does take kind of decimal points in regards to the increment or basically decrease effect from having those assets. Let's have a look. And the other question, Ninja sticker holders. So when I mentioned REVV Motorsport NFTs, Ninja sticker holders are going to be included in that. So we did have essentially a collection competition lined up that we wanted to run with Ninja stickers. But the problem is that once we had it lined up and set up, gas price and ETH just became prohibitive, right? And it's kind of like, if we did that, it would make it kind of near impossible to make sense for people to really try and get involved in it. So we postponed it. And ultimately that ended up being a case where gas and ETH prices had been a continuing problem until maybe recently. So we just kind of delayed it. So for the time being, I mean, it doesn't mean that we don't go back to it and maybe give it a go. But at least for the short term, we will essentially like be looking to involve those content holders in how we start rolling out the first rounds of REVV Motorsport NFTs. So look, there's a second question. Is multiplayer going to be similar to what we experience in TT, however controlled as we do in GP? It's so we have a couple of versions that we've been prototyping. One of them plays very different, where basically what it does is that the concept behind it is that you are making play choices in regards to when or how you may want to overtake, right? It's mostly kind of you are the decision maker as opposed to like the direct controller in some ways. But yeah, it's like we're not going to make a final decision on that for a little while. Because yeah, we just got to prototype and see which one works best and which one is actually most fun to actually want to play for 6, 7, 8 laps or however long it is. Is there plans to align car driver setup to what is required in TT without is the monopoly on performance defined? So that's mostly due to how it balances car stats over driver stats. There is a way that we just basically do a complete one-to-one and factor in the driver stats much more. It's possible that we could go to that. But ultimately, the way it's supposed to work is that the multiplayer is kind of a version of the game that utilizes all of those stats in a manner similar to what you would see in the time trial. But yeah, if it makes sense in regards to like when we think multiplayer is going to roll out, to basically have a stopgap where we kind of have a different type of version, then yeah, we can kind of consider doing that. May have missed it. Do you have any ETA on when we can open our MotoGP pack? So we are targeting to have that be ready in June. We will test. We got a lot that we need to test on it, but yeah, it's a target. We want to do that. Not just driver stats, acceleration, grip are useless as well. No, so yeah, we always want to kind of balance it, but also it's kind of when we get versions that have changes, we also need to make sure that we kind of time it with the beginning of an event as opposed to after it. But we haven't made any real balancing changes for quite a while. But yeah, we're always open to do a kind of a review of balance. There's nothing that stops us doing that. Okay. If possible, to have damage on the NFT. That's not always so. Sometimes, like, it depends on. So not all manufacturers like to see their cars smashed up, right? That's kind of a thing. So it kind of depends. There's ways to degrade the quality, but that would be a different thing ultimately. I mean, there are ways to do this for sure. It's just kind of, does it make sense? Right now, because like we have other stuff that we're looking to build with regards to the gameplay, with like the multiplayer part of it and stuff, and it looks like we should go back and do a bit of balancing. We're probably not going to look at doing anything in regards to damaging of NFTs, at least for the time being. I mean, testing, sure, we can do. So for those who didn't see the question, is there any plans to involve the community in design decisions or testing? So testing is a possibility. We can always think about basically having kind of like a beta kind of let's say like that runs in tandem to kind of the full version. It's just something that we need to have the overhead to operate with obviously everything else we're doing right now. That's probably something that we don't want to kind of spend too much time developing at this very moment. But yeah, there's nothing like there's nothing that stops us wanting to do those kind of things in regards to like, oh, we don't want to do it because we don't want people to see the game, right? That's not what it is. So it's always a possibility, sure. Design decisions, so like in regards to more like a governance model, I suppose, in some ways, right? We're thinking of ways of governance overall, but it's also making it so it doesn't become too weighted, right? Which is ultimately what governance is in some ways, where it's kind of you have the most voting power by just being the wealthiest. We don't necessarily want to go purely down that path. So there are a few ways that if we did do a governance system, we'd want it to kind of factor in a few other things as well, where you can vote for stuff, right? Or kind of have impact on design decisions. I mean, bare minimum, we collect everything that pops up in the suggestions channel, right? And we have something internally right now where we have like a list of all the things that people talk to us about and suggest us, and all the kind of bugs that we find and stuff like that. So like it's part of the process. It's like when people are suggesting stuff, it's not just like going out there. We collect it and review it, and we see what we can do alongside kind of what else we've got scheduled. GP, so instant GP event results, not going to happen right now, unfortunately. It's a lot of UI that's updated for that stuff, and also like a different way that the leaderboards categorize as well. So we're not going to do that yet because we were focused instead on basically revamping the entire system, so that won't necessarily be needed. That's one of the reasons why we didn't basically put the effort on doing that, because it's just kind of, we weren't intending to use the current system for much longer anyway. Could you not just write report, have someone issue it? It must be for, so yeah, I mean, that's what we do now. That's what we do now. It's just kind of like, we are in a situation where we're growing because we have like lots of work and projects that we're running concurrently and want to be doing, right? So we're definitely not like in a situation where we're sacrificing progress on one thing for another, right? But it is an overhead to put together the reports for sure, right? And it's kind of, we do them as quickly as we possibly can, but doing the report, basically pulling the data, compiling the report manually is something that we don't like doing. We would love it to be kind of more accessible and out there immediately. But it is time consuming. But it's just basically, we weren't planning to use this system for a long time anyway, right? It's always kind of a placeholder for something else ultimately. So yeah, although it's not great, and obviously like not great for you guys having to wait, it's also not so great for us to kind of have to spend the time doing it. But yeah, it's we always will try and do it as fast as we possibly can, because obviously we want to tell everybody that it's there, this is what you can expect, this is what you're going to get, and like go forward and issue the rewards. And then obviously that kind of helps everybody playing for the next event and getting ready for the next event. So it works out best for us if everybody gets everything immediately. It's just, there is sometimes a little bit of overhead for some of this stuff. For new players, is there a plan for free play? For F1 Delta time, probably not. For REVV Motorsport, possibly yes. So the renting system becomes a different consideration when we talk about in context with REVV Motorsport, right? So a lot of this stuff, we're probably thinking of experimenting it with there, mostly because we just have a lot more freedom and flexibility. So yeah, we've got some ways that it can be done. No really elegant solution that we like a lot, but it's a lot of these things like that we may have mentioned before with F1 Delta time and stuff like that. REVV Motorsport allows us to use it as a little bit of a playground, but it's not as in like we throw a bunch of stuff out there. It just allows us to try some things that maybe we couldn't try with F1 Delta time. Data free, you should consider hiring track use. Yeah, so I mean, like in regards to like new players and stuff, that's where like the larger ecosystem is something we want to kind of utilize. So what that means is that players can start playing in REVV Motorsport. The rewards will be different to what they see in F1 Delta time, and likewise with MotoGP. And then they can say, okay, I can now get hold of an F1 Delta time racing kit, right? And I can start playing in F1 Delta time and stuff like that. So it's kind of, it would be different. Like we would use the larger ecosystem to allow onboarding, as opposed to trying to squeeze it all into a single individual title. Okay. I reckon. I reckon we're good. I mean, it doesn't mean that you don't stop asking questions. Throw them in there, and obviously, like I said, we get round to it. We want to see it. But yeah, I think for today and this kind of experiment we decided to run, give us some feedback on it. Let us know if it was insightful. If you want something different from answers, you know, give us that feedback as well. But yeah. Thanks for basically tuning in. Much appreciated. Look forward to REVV Motorsport and Formula E happenings coming up. Look forward to getting packs minted to your wallets and subsequent card openings that are going to be happening. Look forward to the next batch of events that we're pushing out for F1 Delta time. We're always doing as much as we can. We want to keep everything super exciting. Staking 2020. We will talk more about staking at another time. But good question to ask. But yeah, let's call it there. Thank you, everybody.